Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, for those who haven't met me, my name is William Lamkin. I'm a musician. Um, I'm currently going to Carnegie Mellon University for my master's degree. I'm studying music technology. But before that, um, I'm a Louisville native. I went to University of Louisville, the music school, and participated a lot in the music scene. I've done a lot of shows and bands, um, playing at like live venues and stuff. And I use Ableton to do that, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Um, that's there's this Ableton Live session view. I think kind of gets overlooked when I guess like people are transitioning to the DAW. I guess because it's like the least familiar, right? If you come from Pro Tools, like I did, it might be the most like alien at first, but there are a lot of strengths to it, and I'll show you a couple ways in which I use those. So first of all, I just wanted to show, I guess, like some examples of, what I've done with Ableton Live in like a live setting. I primarily have used like Ableton Live as a host for like virtual instruments when using a live, and you can see here, this is a picture of me playing with my band Quality Cable, and I literally would go to all these gigs. I would have my big MIDI piano and my laptop and like a little Scarlett interface to like send out to the PA. And yeah, this was kind of what I would use. This was my like Quality Cable setup. Because like coming from a like a laptop music setting, or like using like DAWs to kind of like write like compositions, I didn't really have like hardware synthesizers or like the other kind of like electric keyboards that are like good for gigging, I guess. I couldn't switch between different sounds easily. So I would literally have like every different like track on an EP, or on a every different track here with like a different VST, and have like faders control those, or be able to like switch back and forth between them, or like mix them together. And yeah, here's another video, I think. This was a show I gave. Hold on, let me share with computer sound real quick. So I have a couple different like MIDI instruments here. This is like an Akai APC40, I believe, which is kind of like an Ableton specific controller. And then I had a like a MIDI drum pad, and then like a microphone going in, like an audio interface into Ableton. So all these things are processed live, which I think Ableton Live is specifically like very good for, as someone who doesn't have like a ton of like hardware effects, like like rack gear, or like guitar pedals, stuff like that. So it's really cool. Like from my laptop, I can control all these things, or have it like run through these different effects, and then being able to like change them live. Yeah, I think that's one of the strengths of Ableton 2 is you have so much control over like MIDI and how you interact with like the actual interface of Ableton. Like, I think like coming from other DAWs, being able to just, you know, like literally like map any button to like any fader or slider or something, like really, really makes it so you don't have to like stare at your laptop, or, you know, whatever you're doing. Even in like a studio setting, if you're not like at a laptop, I think it's cool to like really interface your gear with like your workflow. And I think that's a thing I just like haven't really found in like other software. Like Ableton is like so engineered around this. And I think that's like going back, if you look at the history of Ableton, that's what it's always been about. It's always been about this view, this session view, like using it live. Let me bring up another project here. Okay. Yeah, I just saw the comment from you, Chris. It's kind of like using a hardware mixer for live shows, definitely. And I've definitely like used it for that. I think that's like the best introduction to the session view, is kind of thinking about it like a mixer. I mean, that's what this is here with the different like volume sliders, panning, soloing, recording. And then, you know, this up here, you can almost think about like completely separately, and I'll get more on that later. I think one way I've also used the session view that I'd like to talk about is just setting up like effects racks, basically, or just like having audio come in and then coming back out, just using it as like an live effects processor. So this is just kind of like a recent thing I was playing around with here. I recently got a new electric guitar here a couple months ago. So I wanted to, you know, I don't have pedals or anything, but I feel like in a lot of ways, I don't really need it right now, especially because you know, I'm not gigging with the guitar, I'm not doing shows. But Ableton has like a lot of really good like built-in effects that you can chain together in ways that would like replicate, you know, like any other like pedal effects chain. So let's see. Audio is coming in here. Okay, there we go. You hear that? Okay, awesome. So, yeah. Let me just switch over to here. You know, if I wanted to like bring in my guitar and just like play around with this like at home, I can bring it in here. You know, this is kind of what it sounds like, with no processing going on, just like clean into the interface. But then what I've done with this track here, I've set it up with some effects that Ableton has built in. It has like built-in, you know, like amp and cabinet. A lot of stuff like specifically built around like simulating what a guitar would go through. There even is one of its effects, you know, pedal, which is like in the UI, even like kind of like modeled after what a pedal would be. Yeah, pedal's like so versatile. I feel like I've kind of slept on all of these effects, like amp and cabinet. I kind of just like, I don't know, I kind of like ignored them, partially because like Ableton has like so many different similar kind of things, you know, like instead of going to like the amp or like the pedal, I would kind of like pick one of the other you know, distortion effects, but like they all have like a different character. There's like a huge difference. It's kind of like a delay now because it's going through Zoom. But when I'm, you know, writing music and trying to come up with sound design and figuring out like how I want to play my guitar, if I was going to record it, I think it's amazing that I can just like put this together in like such an easy way, turn off and on, you know, different effects and have them like be visible down here. Yeah. Let me play some of this. Or yeah, like I've soloed a couple things. Let's see. This is kind of like something, this is kind of like the stuff I would do. I would like build up loops like these with the clips up here, clip view. And that would kind of give me a way to, it would give me something to like accompany if I wanted to like solo. And that's how I would make these entire tracks here. I would gradually build it up loop by loop and like never touching the arrangement view. I would have these loops go on and you know, if I was playing some stuff like this, like the drum loop and like the kind of like synth line, I would just have those run and I would like record another loop to go on top of that, then add another, add another, add another. And yeah, are there any questions so far?
William, when you performed out with this, what was your go-to for like clip launching and yeah, just triggering or changing different stuff? Or even if you're sitting there kind of just composing at home, do you do it all in the screen, or do you have a controller that you prefer using?
I have used in the past like a MIDI controller that's like specifically built around like launching clips. It wasn't the push, but it was kind of like it. Like pull up the thing. Yeah, it's the Akai APC40. It's Mark II. Yeah, it was just like built around like launching clips in the clip, yeah, in like the session view, and it has like the faders and everything. But I haven't used it in a while, and kind of preferred just using like Live's like built-in, like the scene launch here. Like, let's see. And this is like pretty simple. Just like be able to trigger multiple things at a time. It's like really simple. And, even when I had or even when I was using like the clip launch controller, most of what I would be doing is like launching scenes anyway. So, I mean, it's just kind of like the choice of whether to use a mouse or like have a like physical button to press. But, even then, you could trigger any of these with like, you could just like have it trigger with a like literal like key on your keyboard or something,
And then we just had a question come in there from Rachel, just asking for more explanation on like what a scene is.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely like a big part of the session view. So yeah, let me get to that. Okay, so let me just talk about the different parts of what's happening up here. Like, I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. If you're familiar with the mixer, I think anything in Ableton, definitely like, I still have this up, the info view. Just being able to like see what everything does, still using it like years into using Ableton. But yeah, so on each track, these are clips, and basically they contain, either audio or like MIDI, depending on what kind of track it is. And you can choose to have them loop. You have a couple other different features. You can change the gain. You can make it like right in here, like louder. You can transpose it. If it's audio, I guess like looking at a MIDI one, like let's solo this. And this is kind of like the same way, it's the same thing you'd like look at if you were like editing a like MIDI or something in the arrangement view, but it's kind of designed around these like short loops. That's kind of, I guess, like the strengths or I guess like how I use it like foundationally in the session view. So you can, based on like the layout here, every horizontal row is a scene. So on this first scene, I don't have anything here except for this drum loop. Oh, shit. And you can kind of think about each scene as like a section of a song, or like I guess like a choice of texture in a song. So if I wanted to go to the next scene, it's the same thing, but it adds like this guitar layer. And then the next one And what's cool about this is you now have like a full song that you can put together, but it's not tied to like a specific time. You can have like this like loop as long as you want it to, and then whenever you want to jump to the next section, you can just trigger that. Or then go back to a previous one. And it's this kind of like non-linearity in like composition that I feel like is kind of freeing. You know, when you're stuck in the arrangement view, well, I don't want to say stuck, but like when you're only like using the arrangement view, it can feel like you have to like make a choice with everything. You have to choose like exactly how long you want this like section to be. You have to choose like exactly how long you want it to like loop and when the next section starts, or like when to like automate this like effect coming in, right? Well, in the session view, kind of detaching it from the like timeline means that you don't have to worry about that. And I guess that's like, for me, when I'm composing or just like coming up with different sounds, it's useful to not have to think about the time exactly. If I wanted to, I could go back and like record it or like put it onto the arrangement view to have, you know, an exact like um, recording that I don't have to like replicate again later or perform again later. Um, but it's it's just like such a relief for me to not have to think about that all at the same time. Um, I think like in an even like further extreme of this, I have a different project here. And I think in my first presentation with the user group, I showed this, so some of you might remember this. But this was kind of like one of my explorations into, I guess, like getting off the grid in Ableton. And this is like a more extreme like way of doing this, but in these clips here, I actually have set up so they're not like tied, they're not quantized to a beat. And they're continuous forever until I decided to go to like the next clip or make it stop. So this is kind of like a way for like, you know, with the press of a button, I can play this chord that I have programmed. Yeah, like even in this example, right? I can like stay in a on like one of those chords if I feel like it needs to go longer. But you know, I don't have to like exactly worry about like playing the chord if I was, you know, playing like putting it in through like MIDI or something. I already have the chord programmed. I can just trigger it whenever I want. And like that's that non-linearity, right? Um, yeah, like I guess like this is like a more extreme example. Another project I've done. Let's see. Well, these are just like sketches I kind of like fool around with. Like late at night, I'll get an idea and I decide to do something in here. Actually, yeah, okay. Here's one. And this kind of shows off another feature of clips that I think is like really useful. And another reason why I kind of like have stopped using that controller when like triggering clips and stuff. Because for one thing, I kind of like I learned how to do this, um, but so you don't have to manually trigger all of these. If I wanted to, right now it's kind of set up like these normal clips um, to where I would have to like either trigger in the scene or trigger them individually. But you'll see like these two here, they kind of look different. And they already have these next two prepared. And you'll see the reason for that is because I have a follow action set up. So what that means is it kind of, I mean, it follows what it's named. This basically says, it gives it, you can like program in instructions for this clip to go to the next clip underneath of it. So you're getting like structure to your scenes in a way. You're kind of like giving some control like back to Ableton, but it also means you don't have to like manually press it yourself. So like what I had here was I wanted this to like transition at a set time, but I didn't want to have to like go to the next one myself by like pressing the next scene. So this says, you know, after this clip is done playing, go to the next one. And you can have it do anything. You can have it like stop or play again. 1, 2, 3, go. You'll see it switched over. I didn't have to do anything. But yeah, like if I wanted this to, let's say, you know, go back to, or just like stop after this one's done. Or I was editing the first one. Okay. Let's see. On the follow action. And I'm going to program it to stop. And this one's done. But even though I haven't set the loop, I believe it should stop. Or maybe because I have loop on. But I mean, that's basically like the gist of it. You're programming your Ableton scenes to like change, or your clips to change without you. And you can like change any of these live, like I was doing too. Do you ever use MIDI or key mapping of the scene launching parameters? I haven't really like done that as much. I've thought about like using that as a as like an interesting thing, like performatively, to kind of like be able to like really get into like the modularity of like each clip and scene and like trigger them individually or have them like randomly go to a certain one. And yeah, yeah, it is great. Um, like for those who aren't familiar, um, you can program any of these things with MIDI, like I was talking about before, or like even just like a button on your keyboard. So like, let's say I'm going to play this one. And you can get to those by pressing either key or MIDI up here. So yeah, like I just literally pressed like a button on my keyboard here to trigger this. Those play, stop, up, down buttons disappear when you aren't in key or MIDI map. Oh, are you talking about the follow actions?
No, I'm go into key map real quick.
Okay.
And then on the master track, you see those buttons that appear. They're normally hidden, but these are really great. And these are what I was asking about. You can map these to your keyboard, so it's like play a scene, stop the scene, go up or down a scene, and so you can just use your whatever key you want to map to navigate through and launch scenes just with your regular like typing keyboard or a MIDI controller.
Okay. Let's try that, honestly. Let me just do all that, comma, and I'll make this period. So.
And then you'll probably want to map the play and stop buttons too.
Sure. Okay.
Because the up and down will navigate, but they won't do anything other than that. They'll just highlight a different scene.
Okay. So if I was playing this one, okay, yeah. Yeah, I can really see how that's useful already.
Yeah, I love that. That's a super useful tool, especially if you don't have like a big fancy grid MIDI controller. If you just key map this, all of a sudden you can really quickly kind of improvise along this approach that William is talking about setting up in a way that is like pretty tactile, which I really like.
Yeah, and you know those like grid keyboards or those grid controllers are useful for a lot of reasons, I think. But I feel like if you don't necessarily like need them to like still be like super performative with Ableton, and you can do that through key mapping or like fall actions, like I was showing. Yeah, are there any other questions? Any last questions? I guess I can answer anything about session view. It doesn't have to be exactly like what I was just talking about.
Well, I guess more on that line, do you ever, one thing I'm super interested about is like the ability to be able to set up different launching timings, right? Like the different launch quantization. So if you have like one track full of just one shots, like potentially a, just like a drum kit, just one shots in clips. And then the other ones, you have those more loops. Do you ever do any projects like that where you're like mixing those launch? I know that usually comes into play when people are using like grid controllers and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you ever do anything that differs those at all?
Yeah. So like in the other one I was showing, I like turned off quantization completely. So you can like trigger it whenever you'd want, which is probably what you would want to do if you were using like a grid controller for, all these things. Like, let's, if I dropped a couple sounds in here. And right now it's quantized to the global setting, which is 1 bar right now. So that's why, if like one of these is playing, it'll like wait until the next bar starts. But if I wanted to make it so, like, let me connect these to 1 and 2. And I wanted to turn it off so they play exactly when I play. So now I don't have to like worry about like quantization. So I could, have like these be looping. And still like, have those come in as like different clips, right? Right. Okay. Any other last questions?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, can you
Sure,
hear me?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're in session view and you want to record what you're improvising, so you hit record, does it, then if you switch to the other view, would it be laid out there with the timing that you did? Is that how that works? Like it would copy it over there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can demonstrate that.
Okay.
So if you go back to the arrangement view right now, this is what it kind of looks like. And this just means that it's like defaulting towards the I guess like the session view, right? Like what you're playing and everything is going in here. There is a button here I'll see in both views. It's this red one that says back to arrangement. So you could have like different content in one of these. Like if I had a different MIDI clip, I could have it, have a different thing. Right now it's grayed out, so it's going to play what's here instead. Right, yeah, commitment button. So right now, since it is defaulting towards this, if I press record, it's going to record onto the arrangement view what I'm triggering here. So let's try that. So if you over here, now it looks like this. You can kind of see them, they're grayed out. But then if you press this button and press play here, it would play back what you just like played, like when you recorded. So that's a good way of like saving your performances, basically. And I've done that for like, things I've released. Is just like actually like performing them live and just recording it to like the information in the arrangement view.
Okay, and then if you do that again, because the next time you worked with it, it might be different, I guess you would just save it with a different name so that it wouldn't be like recording over what you did.
Right, yes.
Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Of course. Any other questions? I guess like, we can use this to transition into, I guess, like the Q&A thing. So I guess we don't have to do exactly session view, but yeah, we can answer anything.
Yeah, thanks for all that, William. That was great to see just how you work in there. And yeah, I'm interested to see what you make this summer. Are you you talked about making music, are you gonna be using like session view approach in some of the stuff you're making this summer, you think?
Probably. I am working on it as like more of like, I guess like already like structured songs. But I will be, I guess like, recording into these things, like live, like using like my guitar or bass, whatever, and getting those instruments into it. I'll like use these like same approaches to kind of like mess around with things or like have different versions going on before I like commit to having like an exact clip that I wanted to use in my arrangement.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like you said, I think, yeah, now's a good time to transition to kind of that open Q&A. Yeah, if other folks have either other things to chime in on either how you use session view or other questions there, either about, yeah, any of that clip launching or scene or transitioning from there to the arrangement view, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, yeah, you can chime in with how you use it or really any other question, and then we can just look to the group to field them. And but yeah, feel free to either jump on the mic or drop a question in the chat. I know for me, I really love session view. Again, we teach a lot of youth, and we try to get them on the Ableton push. And it's just a really nice and quick workflow showing them that, hey, you can build up a basic track structure variations, with just like four different tracks there, and then just use the on off kind of mute, almost like engineer studio style, to just be able to, bring tracks in, mute them off. And you can, if you're just doing a simple beat, yeah, you can commit that to the arrangement side really quick and have something that sounds great.
Yeah.
So I got a question real quick.
Sure.
When you're performing live and you see your CPU meters going up, how do you, and if it starts getting glitchy, do you like freeze a track or something, or how do you kind of in real time?
That's a good question. I actually was running into that during this presentation.
That's what I was thinking about it, because I run into it a lot too, and I'm like, there's got to be an answer to like if you just freeze one of the tracks that is pulling more, or and then Chris showed me on the new version, they've got those meters at the bottom, which helps out a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even like this is just like so much more like reactive than it used to be. And yeah, the like having like individual like CPU meters that you can for each track, super useful. I think the new version also, I think they have made some fixes, but I've kind of run into more of a problem with 11 than I used to do in like 10. Like I've been hitting like kind of like the CPU overload, like hitting those glitches on a lot less intensive projects. So I'm sure those will get like ironed out over time. But I guess like what I do, um, I mean, first thing is like close out any other applications, right? So I feel like I was hitting a lot of those in my presentation because I had Zoom running at the same time, which is pretty intensive. And then I have like a million tabs open on Chrome, so that also does not help. But I think a couple things to do. Flattening a track is a good one, like you said. And for those who might not know what that is, so like I have this MIDI track here. That's kind of like a lot of information that, or a lot of processing that Ableton has to use. And I have like a bunch of effects down here, especially like reverb, which is one of the more intensive ones. So if I wanted to make it more efficient CPU wise, I would right click it and click on freeze track, which takes a little bit. And this kind of makes everything, it kind of turns into like a single version of itself. Like it's not going to like process everything live. It's already done the calculations on that. So
Well, I'm glad you said that you've been seeing that it feels like in the new version that it seems like it's, you know, overloaded kind of thing, because I've noticed that too and I thought it was me. So it's reassuring to know it's not just me.
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's just like, you know, like new versions, they just have bugs and they've added like new features. I'm not exactly sure why. Like it's like it feels like so much more than it used to be. But yeah, like I hope it gets ironed out. Like this is basically a constantly red for me. Like I'm not even like doing anything right now. Like nothing is happening in the session, but it's still like peeking out here.
I know I have that issue a lot just because an older machine in general. And so, I mean, what I resort to a lot of times is even instead of the flattening or freezing a track, I'll just route it into an audio track because it's most often with me the MIDI instruments. It's like the VSTs or Ableton's built in because a lot of stuff is built on the wavetable synthesizer, and that one seems to max it out a lot. But so I'll just commit whatever the basic level like melody is or drums or something to an audio, at least just for the time being, because usually what I'm after at least is having more versatility with whatever effects. So I'll leave those on and active, able to control with the push and while I'm just kind of messing around, and then just deactivate that MIDI track. Always I can come back to it later. And but I kind of like having the sample, just cut to audio right there, because then I'll get a lot of other ideas about how to chop it up and rearrange it even in different ways. But I almost have to do that just as like a point of process now, because having too many of those instruments going at once, it really bogs it
Right.
down.
Yeah, I just until recently was working on a 2013 MacBook Pro, and so I got my money out of this thing, and I would approach live performances. I would create a separate live session, so I would save as, and then I would like have underscore live for whatever track that I'm working on, and I would do those exact things that Yared is suggesting, like bouncing out to audio. Anything you can bounce to audio has to be. But like Craig, to your question of like what do you do in the like moment, like you hope no one notices, and you try to think of like, is there something simple you can do? Because like the reality is you just have to keep the music going, and so
Yeah.
that is a really tricky thing. And so I just kind of like grit my teeth and hope for the best. But I think the best way to the most successful way to do it is to just test the crap out of it beforehand, is to run your set, see if you can push it to its limit and break it, and then kind of and re-engineer it to be leaner and leaner every time. um that that approach of like just using your CPU for effects and processing for live performance is like crucial. It really is. And even if your synth sound isn't like as dynamic, like it's like only like 80% of the way there, it's still totally going to get a vibe across. So I, you know, that's something I'm happy to um trade for, like stability and like no dropouts.
Hmm. I think
So
another thing I've done was, or I guess real quick, um, changing the buffer size. So right now I kind of have it at like one of the highest ones. That adds some like latency, which obviously like has some problems with performing live, right? But I think that it also is a quick fix if you like wanted to like jump in like the settings and just like up the buffer size real quick. That could be like a good way to like save some CPU.
yeah, for sure. That's like I mean, as long as you're not doing like rhythmic like inputting at the time, like drumming or something like that, that could kind of throw that haywire. But if you're launching clips, I think you can actually get away with a pretty high buffer setting. So yeah, that's a good call. I, you know, I had a question. I wanted to hear from anyone. Like, what is something you do in live that you don't think you've seen anyone else do? Or what's like something something you've been really enjoying doing that you just learned recently in live? I would love to hear just like kind of anyone's take who wants to share that. Like, what's something you've been really psyched about like learning or doing? Because there's a
Stop
good chance that
sharing.
like one of us, like that, I don't know what the thing is that you learned, and I want to know it.
Well, I know I can just start it off because it was brought up in William's presentation earlier. But I've been really getting into using the amp modeling and the cabinet modeling things and just experimenting with some of those. One of the problems I always had with my own music, and I still have this problem, but things sound too sanitized because I use a lot of electronic, yeah, you know, VSTs and software plugins and um, even just like a lot of, you know, I use a lot of Rhodes and things as well, and like whirlies and just keys, but they're all synthetic and they all sound, you know, in the box a little bit, even though Ableton does a really good job at modeling those instruments. But I've been finding it so fulfilling to mess around with all of those amp and cabinet presets, and just trying those on different groups of tracks to you know, paint the whole track with kind of a particular tone or feel or space. But yeah, I found that really helpful because I was doing some like blues type hip hop kind of stuff recently. And it was all, yeah, when I threw those on there, it's like that gave them literally like instant feel a little bit. So yeah, I've been excited to dive into some of that.
I love that. Saturation is like, you know, it's not just for like metal like guitars. It's a little saturation is like just such a gorgeous, beautiful thing on so many different sounds. I can really like bring something forward or fill in like the low end or bring up like high like air sounds with just a little bit of saturation. That's why when William pulled up the pedal, I loved that there's three algorithms to the pedal. There's the overdrive, the distortion, and the fuzz. And if you listen to them and juice them, if you turn them all the way up and just listen to how they change the character of the sound, you'll hear one is really kind of focusing on kind of it's adding harmonics to the low frequency material especially, and then you hear one and it's really bringing up the mids, the like 3K region, so it feels like the sound all of a sudden jumps out forward in the mix. And then the there's another one that kind of boosts the top and the bottom, and so it kind of scoops it, kind of creates like a smiley face sound. And like using those at like, sometimes I'll dial it in at like a gain. So there's a gain knob and a wet knob, and I'll turn the gain up like 5% and then the wet knob at like 1%. Like, so tiny, tiny, tiny incremental, but it'll create like a bloom in the sound. And that's something like that. I think it took me too long to realize the kind of strength in harmonic processing. Yeah, right on. Who else has got something cool or exciting or anything that you're excited about? Or excited about knowing. So if you have a question, that's cool too.
Chris, did you have anything that you feel like that's like unique to you that you've been working on?
You know, it's not unique, but I do. Off of Yard's comment, like I've been digging into harmonic processing the last like year and a half, 2 years, and been really like deep end. And there's I've been enjoying creating multiband processing inside of Live using the audio effect racks. And actually, I can share with y'all real quick. Let me do this. So I've got a session here. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. And let me pull up. Okay, let me know if you can hear this.
I can hear it.
Cool. Okay. So this is like these are some of my students' pieces this semester for the end of the semester. And we were working on mastering them to make them all sound really consistent. There is something I've been doing lately and working with my students to do where I just take a blank audio effect rack. So if you've never used one, you can just grab a standard audio effect rack, and I get confused because they've mixed things up in 11, but you can get this just blank effect rack. You can put whatever you want into it. And what I like to do is I like to grab a rarely used for me, an EQ3. And what I'll do, I like EQ3. EQ3 is kind of set up like a kind of like a DJ EQ. You've got a low band, a mid band, and a high band, and then you have these two crossovers. So crossover is basically where the split between the low and the mid and the high frequencies are. So you can kind of set that. It also has these mute buttons that are going to be useful for this. So basically, I'm on this track and I've got this audio effect chain with just a basic EQ3 on it. No boosts, so it's not doing anything to the sound. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to open up the chain view. And so the chain view shows you what effects you've got going. So what's one of the cool things about audio effect racks is you can have multiple audio effects in one kind of container, but you don't have to just put one effect after another after another. You can actually split them, like fork them, like branches of a river into different chains to route through different processes. And so this is what I've been having fun with. So what I'm going to do is, before I do anything else, I'm going to go to my drive and I'm going to find that pedal. I'm going to drop that into this chain. And then so I've got this chain that has an EQ3 and a pedal, and then I'm going to duplicate it 2 times. So I've got 3 chains. All 3 of them are processing audio right now. And they all 3, if I click on each one of them, have the exact same EQ3 and a pedal on each one of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename them low, mid, and high. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the low chain, and I'm going to turn off the mid and the high frequencies. So I'm kind of creating this chain right here is just going to process all the frequencies below 250 hertz, because that's where the crossover is for this EQ. And then I'm going to go to the mid chain, and I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to turn off everything except for the mid frequency. And then the same for the high. So I'm going to turn off everything except for the high frequency. And now I have a pedal that is on each individual frequency band, so 3 bands. And so if I listen to this track, okay, so this track is very kind of like low, mid, forward. And say I want to bring up some of the lows. If I go to my low chain, so what I've done is I've created a multi-band effect. And what's cool is I added a pedal because that's kind of my go-to for harmonic processing, but you can add all sorts of things. One of the other ones I like to add is, let me just throw in a drum bus to the low chain I've highlighted right here. And what I want to do is I want to bring up some of the low frequency material. I know the overdrive is kind of a lower harmonic processing thing. So I'm going to solo this. We're just hearing the low stuff. Now that's like way too much. So what I want to do is I want to bring the dry wet way, way back down. So this is with it off. And I'm hearing some pretty rough harmonic distortion, but when I listen to it in the mix, let's hear what it sounds like. So that's with and then without. So it's knocking just a little heavier. And so I've really enjoyed this process to dig in and use kind of like you would a multiband compressor inside of Live, but you can basically throw any kind of effect you want and affect just one band of the frequency. And that's been kind of a revelation for me in my processing inside of Live lately.
Yeah, I've been getting really interested in that too, and it's just like a whole new world when you start getting into the racks in general. It's yeah, it's kind of crazy. Most of what I've done is just like using them to kind of like split my keyboard into like doing like a couple different instruments or things like that. Like I'll have like one chain on like the low end of my keyboard as an instrument, or like, you know, have different effects on like the low end, and then like different effects on the high end. Like let's say I only wanted like delay on you know, like the higher keys on my keyboard or something like that. I've done that, but yeah, I'm like really interested in like really digging into more of the yeah, like having different chains and stuff like that too, and like switching between them.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about with like keyboard splitting is like one of the things you can do with effect racks and instrument racks. If y'all haven't tried it, it's so fun. If you've got like a big MIDI controller, you can have just like one octave that plays like that is processing delays. And so if say like you're playing a part and the high part is a little shrill or something, you can do a little bit of extra processing in that top octave. That's, you know, that's probably the thing I get the most stoked about with live is how when you throw in like Max for Live, like with like the LFO tool into the into effect racks, into instrument racks, all of a sudden like anything that you build is like super unique. It's super specific to your patch. Like everyone's like they could throw in the same effects and they're still going to get something slightly different because you can set ranges yourself individually and you get a lot of nuance with those. Yeah. Anyone have any questions? Things that they've been trying to figure out or
Yeah, I'll ask a question. So I was experimenting with something I was experimenting with the EQ on something and I was moving it around. Like I was making it very extreme to like try to, you know, try something out. And I liked the way it was sounding, like it was sounding like an accompanying instrument to something that I was making. And I was wondering, like, is there a way to record that? Like, I know that I don't know what this is called exactly or how to do it, but I know that people like take clips, like audio clips, and then pull things out of it to like make their own instrument. You know what I mean? Like to make a bass instrument out of like some found sound, for instance. And I don't know if this thing I was doing with the EQ could work like that somehow. Does anybody know what I'm talking about or know like even if you don't have time to explain it, like what would be the keywords to even look up?
So the things that come to mind for me are resampling. So you can resample the audio from like extreme processes. So I think of like grabbing an EQ and like just dragging it up and getting like a real cool resonant tone that wasn't there before, like creating like a bass or something. Opening up another audio track right below the audio track you're working on. And then for the input, choosing instead of an input, choose the resample input. And it will record anything it hears. And then you can just record there, grab that little snippet of audio, and then you can drop that into a simpler as a waveform. And then all of a sudden you've got a brand new pitchable instrument. There's also automation that you can use to kind of like to if you want like this like swoop of an EQ just at the beginning of the sound, you can draw in automation in your clip and where it turns it up at the beginning but turns it down at the end of the clip, and you can kind of craft even more detail to like your own kind of instruments. Anyone else have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just more what you said, just the routing of tracks. I use that all the time, and you know, I'll use that even to then layer it back with the original or something. Like if you've got some really cool, yeah, just something magic happening on this one particular kind of setup that you've got on effects. Just route that to another audio track. I'll just record that whole loop because I work a lot with clips and loops and stuff. And then have that to be able to mix with the original to varying degree, you know, and you can mix that with like that volume automation if you want it to, slowly go to that affected clip. Or if that's what you're looking for, then, you know, that original material just gets deleted and you've got that new audio to do whatever you want with.
Okay, so that when you were saying, Chris, to drop it into simpler, is that where you're making the instrument? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, so simpler is a device, and in a live describes it as an instrument, and it's basically a sample player that is that has MIDI input, and so it will change the pitch of the sample as like your keyboard goes up or down. So simpler is the kind of go-to, the easiest one to start with. There's another one called sampler, and that one is in the suite bundle. But to be honest, I have it and I never use it. I'm always using simpler. It's just, it works very easily. So yeah, what you would do is you would create a MIDI track and put simpler on the MIDI track and then just drop in your audio file. And what's cool is once you've dropped it in, you can use, there's like a little arrow with at a little arrow at the beginning and a little arrow at the end of the visual waveform that's inside of the simpler, and they're basically start and stop times that you can. So say if you've got a little bit of space before your sample starts playing, you can actually just grab that little arrow and drag it up to the very beginning of your waveform. So you don't even have to be like that precise with your audio editing. Or when you started recording, you can just you can drop an entire song into a simpler and create and just move the start and stop times to just focus on one sound in a song you like, and that becomes a new instrument.
Okay, this is all really good. Thank you both. And when I'm doing the new audio track and choosing resample, is it recording just what's playing in the computer, or would it be picking, or is it like recording it like the room sound, like the speakers of the computer come in? Do you know what I mean? And whatever else is in the room, like which is it doing?
Yeah, so would you want me to like demonstrate it with like sharing my screen? Yeah, it's resampling kind of is basically is sampling like whatever happens on like the master track. So whatever is going here. And by default, all of your tracks are routed to the master. So I guess like kind of going through that process, I kind of have like a sound here, and I was messing with the EQ, got some like resonance on there. But I kind of wanted to make that its own thing. I could have another track here and select resampling and arm it to record. Oh, well, yeah, something else got on too, but yeah, I got that sound here. So if I soloed it, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I got the other thing on it too. So, I mean, whatever. That's our sound, right? And I got that other sound because the other thing wasn't soloed and went to the master. But then, yeah, you would go to like simpler, drag it in, and you have, you have your instrument now based on like whatever you wanted, like any audio.
Yeah, and you can select that resample, and that'll get anything out of the master bus. But then you can also select any of your other individual tracks to just route into another track. So just from that drop down menu where it says external in, yeah, it'll give you that resample option, and then any other track you have, or your sends, which can be really fun to like send a bunch of stuff to your effects sends, and then just record just the audio from that, and then be able to drop that stuff into simplers, because things like reverb tails make beautiful instruments.
Yeah, and to add on to both of those great comments is if you have a live microphone on inside of Live, like say you've got a microphone plugged into track 1, and if it's on, it will record it if you set it just to resample. So like you were asking about room ambiances and stuff like that. So Yared's suggestion of specifying and not just choosing resample, but actually choosing the track that you want to directly come from is a more precise way to do it. And that I think is a real good way to go. But if you're starting with a real simple project and you just have like your one track that's you're like kind of tweaking a sound on, then it's a little easier and you can just set to resample because there's nothing else going on.